So welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for joining today. I'm really pleased to be chairing this session, bringing such a diverse range of people together to support rights on flights, improve the accessibility of air travel. Brief introduction, my name is David Dew-Veal. I'm the co-founder of Aura, the UK's first truly flexible wheelchair accessible vehicle rental service. I've worked in the transport sector for the past decade or more, in particular focusing on how technology can improve the accessibility of transport. I've kind of witnessed quite a lot of firsthand how inaccessible transport is and can be for people with disabilities. My main sense here, though, is that a lot of these issues, a lot of the challenges leading to inaccessibility in transport are solvable and are addressable. They just need the right focus, the right investment, and the right collaboration across industry and with the disabled community as well, obviously as a key part of that. Which I suppose leads nicely into the focus and our objectives for today. So I am joined by Martyn and Chris, who are both at the heart of the Rights on Flights movement and will introduce themselves shortly. In terms of objectives for the session then, we're going to be really focusing this on providing a platform for dialogue between the community, industry, academia, government, and crucially looking at the solutions and potential routes forwards. I think it's really important to acknowledge the challenges and the issues in this space, and we want to do that. However, our focus for today is really looking at how we can solve some of those and the opportunities there. In terms of a quick kind of running order then, we're going to have a 15-minute panel discussion at the start with Martyn and Chris to set the scene before moving into smaller breakout discussion groups where we will come up with our top 5 recommendations for improving air travel for disabled people. We're then going to come back together as a group, share feedback and open the floor for questions if we've got time, because we've only got an hour today. So I suppose part of my job, or my main job really, is helping keep this to time. Final point from me before we move into the panel: this session will be recorded. All the outputs are going to be captured and shared with this group and used to support Rights on Flights and the wider industry make real, continued, tangible progress here. Okay. So, kicking off the panel, I think I'll come to you first, Chris. Could you share a brief introduction of yourself, touching on your personal experience flying and also involvement in Rights on Flights?
I'll start off with my personal experience, and it's 2 kids. I say kids, they are, what are they? They're 29 and 31. Should know that, really, shouldn't I? They're 29 and 31. They live their life in power wheelchairs, and over the years, it was 10 years ago when I first started traveling with my kids, and it's just so undignified, just so unsafe. I'm about to go skiing with my daughter in January, so I kind of know how it works, but it's still going to be a military exercise. And she'll go down the mountains on a sit ski, and that's quite dangerous, but it's actually quite safe compared to air travel. So, and it just needs to change, really. And that's my start in this was to try and understand why my kids in their power wheelchairs couldn't access an aircraft, yet they can access everything over land and sea. And I know that's not perfect, but you can't get on an aircraft. So I set out trying to work out how to do that, and it would take many hours for me to go through that. But in summary, I was part of the Air For All team that have invented the solution, which is being done in America. So, and with Rights on Flights, there's a lot to talk about there, and we'll break that down. And ultimately, the bottom line is legislation is not good, and that's tantamount for the last 20 years, and it's had more band-aids than I don't know what, but the reality is it doesn't work. So I'll stop there and bring him to go back to you, David.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. You're right. We'll absolutely come back to those points on policy shortly. So, yeah, Martyn, same question to you. Could you introduce yourself, personal experience, and involvement in rights on flights?
Yeah, sure. Really, really great to be having this conversation today. As you can see, I'm in the car, so we also have time. I'll do some carpool karaoke requests at the end of the session. But in terms of the actual topic at hand, I have spinal muscular atrophy as my disability. So I had my first wheelchair when I was 3. So my first, it's almost not a memory of flying. It's more my mum and dad passing on how it was for them trying to take me abroad with my first wheelchair, and how complicated and difficult and fraught it was for them as parents. And then as my actual memories kick in from, say, sort of 8, 9, 10 years old through the teen years into adulthood and even up to now, I don't see a lot of improvement. And I actually feel that in some ways it's been got worse and been, even more difficult. A little anecdote: about a year ago, I went to San Marino. So my PA Aga and I flew to Bologna Airport, and then we went from there to San Marino for the World Tourism Organization conference. There was this big global tourism conference about accessibility, and when getting off the plane, the 2 people that were sent to lift me, as many people know, we can't sit in the wheelchair when you're a wheelchair user on the plane, so I have to be lifted out of the wheelchair. There's danger with the chair being broken, put in the hold, and also potential injury for the person like myself being lifted. And the 2 people were arguing with each other. They were not remotely engaged and talking to me, and I basically nearly ended up on the floor, and I got a really bad injury on my knee, and that was a year ago. So yeah, there's so much complexity around the supply chain and why it's quite difficult to have one quick solution. But at the same time, we're in 2024, we can do all sorts of amazing things in the world and beyond to space, but we can't safely put disabled passengers on aeroplanes. So I guess bringing that to rights on flights, that's where the passion to fix this has come from. And knowing Chris and Sophie and Josh, Roberto, Jet for a while, it's been great joining the team and trying to push for solutions, and today's going to be a big part of that as well.
Thanks, Martyn. And I think the policy kind of angle has been coming out already very clearly in the discussion we've had. So, sticking with you, Martyn, could you share your view on the kind of legislative and policy challenges as have been, but also the solutions? I think this is very timely with the news and the announcement that's come out today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so my background is definitely not legal related, a bit more kind of lean into economics from my uni days, but being a disability rights, disability inclusion advocate, you sort of have to get your head round legislation. And most people know in Britain we had the Disability Discrimination Act in 95, so next year will be 30 years, and that was put into the Equalities Act, which I believe was 2010, so that will be 15-year anniversary next year. And that's very much about the disabled consumers having protections and rights around goods and services within the UK. When you go into flying, the problem is that generally you're flying to and from another country, and so the Equalities Act or any sort of legislation in the UK doesn't really cover the actual flying experience and passenger rights of disabled people. And that's where we're seeing a ridiculous number of wheelchairs and other sort of medical equipment being damaged and broken repeatedly. Very often the data's ridiculous, but there's not really any recourse around that because there isn't a legislative protection, and therefore the regulatory bodies don't have that proper legislation to speak to. Now, I'm sure there's all sorts of nuances when you get into the legal world, but fundamentally we need legislation that makes it sure that airports and airlines are doing all the preemptive stuff that they're not doing and could be doing at the moment that causes this damage to equipment and to people, like I said, like myself earlier. And as you referenced today, Lou Hay, obviously the new government since May, the new Transport Secretary has set up a sort of task and finish group to bring everyone around the table to find answers. And I think at Rights on Flights, we're really happy that it's happened after a couple of meetings with Lou Hay, but we're also a bit watching the space to see if the talking in the meeting leads to real results in the end as well.
Thank you. Chris, have you got anything to come in on that? Obviously, you've been very closely involved in that.
Yeah, we Rights on Flights have a kind of policy expert in Roberto, and he's really very good, as long as he speaks in English and doesn't try and fool us with all his kind of little nuances that come with those who know Roberto on this call will know exactly what I mean. But he does know his stuff, and it's really good to have him in the group. For listeners and viewers that don't understand, it's the Equality Act, and then sits in there is something called 1107/2006. So it will tell you 2006. So let's assume 2 or 3 years to draft it and get it passed. It's over 2 decades old, and we've moved on. It's out of date, and there are people in airports and airlines that are kind of following that lead. And it's very difficult to do in a broken system, and which is the legislation is ultimately out of date. However, I've got to say this because it's so true. All the people in the industry do not get up in the morning and say, I'm going to make somebody with a disabilities holiday go wrong. It doesn't happen. That's not how these people think. They are great people, good people, trying to work in a system and infrastructure which needs addressing. And it takes both. It takes not just the Assistive Air Travel Act, which we're trying to put forward as a draft for everybody to feed in on it, and look at infrastructure as well. And yeah, we know there's a money part to play in this, but in my view, certainly when it comes to airlines, let's say, that they should have done this 20, 30 years ago. They should have followed the lead of the social model of everybody being inclusive, but they're self-regulating. They can do what they want, and that's exactly what they do. Some are more feral than others. Some are more the kid at assembly that farted during the headmaster's speech, and that's and they're like that, and you're not going to change them unless they get legislation. I'm not so keen on fines. I don't think that's justified. But there again, what else can you do? And all ideas are welcome about that. So I think there's a lot to do. The AATA answers a lot of those questions, and it is ripe for review.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting point on, I suppose, penalties versus incentives, carrot versus stick, and what's a better way to drive change here. You also kind of mentioned the infrastructure there, Chris, as well, which I know you've kind of got a lot of experience in. Where would you, if you were to pick one or two of the real opportunities to improve the infrastructure and what that would mean? Could you share those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, intrinsically, airports and airlines are a bit like oil and water. You wish you'd talk to each other a bit more. But the cabin environment is such a disabling environment, if I can use that word. So over the years, I got together with two kind of absolute giants in design and certification. That's Priestman Good and also Nigel SWS certification. And the three of us invented Air for All. So it was during COVID and we were about to launch it, and a good friend of mine said, go straight to Delta. And so we took it straight to Delta Flight Products. And I remember Mitch telling me, Chris, I love this. You've got this, got me hook, line and sinker. So the problem in America is massive. They use aircraft and air transport like we use buses and trains. So, it's fast. It goes wrong every day. Again, it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. So if we can get that, those people, my two children, so I'm being selfish here, those two people, those millions around the world that sit in power wheelchairs and refuse to fly. So there's a business opportunity here. So we can bring those in, but more apparently it's about safety and dignity, and I think we bring that back, in spades for the traveller. But if we can fix that, then we're getting part way to putting the airline house in order, are we not?
Absolutely, and I think there's a few themes coming out there around. I suppose Martyn's point on things, well, they definitely haven't changed over the past couple of decades, but potentially even got worse. I think alongside that, though, what we've seen is huge advances in technology, and one of those advantages is sharing data and the ability to communicate. And for me, there's just such an opportunity here of better using technology to bridge some of those gaps within different stakeholders that make up the flying and the airline experience. So I think this is just conscious of time. We've probably got a couple more minutes for questions before we move into speak out. One of the things on my mind here, and it's what you were saying, Chris, around the business case for this as well, and the incentive for airlines and other stakeholders to invest in it. So, Martyn, I know you've done a huge amount of work through Purple Go and more broadly with brands around the business case for accessibility. So, yeah, could you share some of your thoughts on that? I suppose the brand opportunity, the business case opportunity, and how that comes together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the general business case around disability inclusion is, whether it's airline, whether it's, fashion, whether it's other tourism stuff, whatever the industry, it's disabled people are, customers. And so if you're open and inclusive to everyone, you open up a market, and there's a lot of data and numbers about that. So that's sort of the broad point. And then, I think there's just something more about how when you come into airlines, I think we all agree there's the right thing to do, which I just want to put that out there as a general, like, we should be doing this right because it's just ethical and moral. But I think that an airline as a brand that actually says we're going to do this properly, they open up this big marketplace of customers, but there's a kind of halo effect of beyond that other non-disabled customers see that corporate social responsibility, that brand that cares about everyone. So I think there's a business case beyond the disability side as well.
Completely, and that kind of comes together with the brand, the social responsibility, and the business case as well. I think I can see a couple of hands up as we're going through. We're going to make sure that we've got time for questions and input from participants at the end of the session today. But please do add anything into the chat function, and we'll make sure that is captured as part of this. Just before we move into the breakout, Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot with a final question here. Obviously, the group that was announced today. Do you know who might participate in that with the rights on flights?
No, I saw that, and well, you've got to have the airports, haven't you? The Gatwicks and the Heathrow, they're the two biggest functionaries. It's the Manchester Airport Group, but you can't get them all around that table. So you'd like to think that there's a smorgasbord of variation of airports, and the UK airlines as well. So EasyJet, BA and BA, I expect to see them on there, and some advocacy as well. Although rights and flights does come with all that armour around us, there's we're all in some form or fashion have experience, whether that be literally personal or in my case user-led. What I do know is it needs to be transparent. There's no Chatham House rules anymore. If you, as a stakeholder, really believe it, you've got to say so, and you have got to say how we're going to cure this, because it's not cured. I asked once at a conference a few years ago, and there were lots of stakeholders there, what's changed tangibly in the last 20 years? And it was it was silent. There was no change, and there's been some tweaks, but you can only do so much. But everybody around that table has got to be able to speak, and also got to be able to speak without badges on, without representation, although it should come from the stakeholders' voice themselves. And I do understand it's going to be transparent, it's going to be minuted, and so we'll be able to. Rights on Flights will be following that, and we'll make sure everybody is spoken, have their voice. But we need the challenges as well. It's not all about us. It's all about the airlines and the airports as well. What's good for them? What would work for them? So it cuts both ways. It's got to be a fair and level playing field. And we all kind of know the challenges, but quite often it's a domino effect. So I think it's the ability to sit around what is a government table and say, right, this is what we need to do. And if we've got that transparency and people are allowed to wear their voice, because some of them will wear a company hat that maybe restrict them, hopefully that won't happen. But there are those that say and those that do. Let's see what we got.
Watch this space. But either way, it does sound like progress, which is great. Fab. So thanks so much, Chris and Martyn, for the insights there. And I really hope that has, and I really feel that has set the scene now for the breakout discussions that we're going to move into. Fingers crossed the tech works for that. We have tested it, so I really hope it does. So I suppose quick summary of the plan for these breakout groups. So they will be small groups of around 5 to 8 people, of those on the call. We can see the text that's gone up with these instructions as well. These groups will be randomly assigned, and the panelists and myself and Hafsa will join one of these as well. The plan for this group is around 15 minutes, and between the discussion to come up with ideally 5 key recommendations or key solutions to improve air travel accessibility, and that's what we're going to really capture and help feed into the discussion after this call as well. Final thing to say is, please could you nominate a speaker, if you're comfortable, from your group, who will then feed back when we come back together, and we'll collate those ideas as a group, and there'll be that chance to ask questions as part of that session. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you all had a engaging and productive discussion in the breakouts. As I've mentioned before, we went into them. Now we're going to kind of run through the groups in order from 1 to 5, and provide an opportunity to give feedback on the I suppose, feedback generally, but ideally those kind of top 5 opportunities, or however many opportunities there were, discussed in the group to really improve the accessibility of air travel. I think it's now set so everyone can unmute them. Well, individuals can unmute themselves if they want to speak, and provide feedback to the group. What I would say as well is just to make sure that we're not missing anything given the time constraints. If you feel comfortable and able to, please feel free to write comments and summaries in the chat function as well, just to make sure that we've captured that too. Okay, so in that instance, then we'll start with group number 1. So please, could we go to group number 1, and whoever was nominated as the speaker from group number 1 to provide feedback.
I think Tanya was going to speak on behalf of us. Is that all right?
Hi, I wasn't, but it's fine. I feel like I've got to try and remember what we were talking about. But yes, so we covered quite a few bases, but primarily we did look at the kind of passenger assist process at the airports. We also looked at we thought that a priority should be access to the toilets themselves. Damaged equipment was a big thing, as well as thinking about the kind of the damage, and we were also talking about maybe the carrot and the stick approach to kind of consider whether there should be fines or fees for airlines as well. Please, anyone else just chip in, because I didn't actually write anything down.
Hi, I'm not on here, but my name is New McAdam. I was in group 1. One of the things that I felt a bit silly about mentioning is that I think that it might be a good idea to communicate with the insurance companies that are sometimes taken out into because I get Motability insurance with Mark Bates, and I think it might be a good idea to start talking to the big dogs who actually kind of liaise with airlines about how much this is actually costing the insurance companies. Maybe this is a very American perspective, it probably is, but I know that I've had to take out quite a lot of insurance over the last few years because of damaged chairs, specifically specialised equipment for powered wheelchairs, and I know that a lot of people will feel the same way. And I also think that it's a little bit short-sighted to not be fining the airlines, because at the end of the day, money talks, and that's my 2 cents.
We also covered staff training, touching on dignity and language, and wheelchair users and mobility scooter users can often be first at the gate and last on because there's insufficient assistant staff, and having more assistant staff, they are the reasonable adjustments important. And I've experienced several times where I'm taken on last and then there's a passenger and I've been there first, and the pilot will say, we're delayed because of a wheelchair. Well, I'm not a wheelchair, and they're putting the emphasis on me. So staff training and language around that came up, together with how wheelchairs are and mobility aids are handled, and a safe way of doing it to own the assistance at every stage to try and prevent them being broken as often, and staff on the plane saying your wheelchair is actually on the plane, because if you're like me, you're looking out the window thinking, I hope it's on board. And that got covered as well.
I want to quickly come in there because this is one of the biggest problems and I see it regularly, is where people should be put first on, and they're not. And suddenly you're carted up the aisle with everybody watching you on an aisle wheelchair. I've been there, done it, got the T-shirt, and it's against the law. So what do? Well, then nothing happens. The CAA have no instruments. It's a blunt instrument. But we don't want to give fines, but it could be 3 strikes and we start giving them to you. Because if you don't learn after once, twice, 3 times, what can you do? So
yes, I was saying a last resort, and Tamby's right, it's carrot and stick. But if you look at American Airlines that have just been fined $50 million, they're certainly going to start paying attention when those sort of fines are given out. But it shouldn't be your first course of redress. But you definitely need that option, and the CAA need more powers.
I mean, there's so many kind of rich points coming out there just from group 1, and I think we could probably spend an hour talking about all of them, and I really want to. I also really want to give time for the other 4 groups to provide feedback, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to some of these points. So thank you so much. So moving to group 2 now, could I hand over to you to put anything you'd like to add on to what's been said already?
Hi, so my name is Mary Doyle. I was in group 2. My camera's not working today, but yeah, we had kind of 4 kind of main areas. So initially, they've been covered already. The mobility device safety is paramount because we're disproportionately impacted because we need our devices. So we don't need to go over that too much because everyone knows the drill. The second was basically accountability, and how do we ensure that? And as everyone has mentioned, do we do the hardcore fining or do we do something more gentle? And I'd hope here also that we can utilise we've got the accessibility frameworks of the airline and the airport. So how can we strengthen those basically to ensure that people are being held accountable when they don't follow the processes and people are genuinely seriously impacted? The third point was kind of regarding communication in general, that it's just lacking and of poor quality even when you do get it. And the fourth one is kind of a more of holistic approach and just regarding a cultural change in how we view and train people in disability and language and everything around disability. Because if we can get the foundations correct, the rest can basically be built on top of that, basically. But we still have a lack of consistency in the education that's received at the airport and airline and third party level. So we need to pull all that together so they all get the same high quality education. So, but yeah, if there's anything else from the gang that you want to chip in, you're super welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really, really helpful. I mean, already some key themes coming out around kind of that the dignity that comes with staff that are properly trained and aware of how to kind of approach wheelchair users and disabled people and their families. I think there's a piece on communications already coming out and how people are who are travelling are kind of communicated with and made to feel kind of confident that devices and equipment is being properly treated. So yeah, really powerful stuff coming through. I can see we've got in the chat, there's a few points in the chat around crew training, users staying in their chairs, and instructions to airline crew as well. But I will also open the floor to group 3 for anybody who'd like to come in and provide some colour on any of those points.
Yeah, that was my thing. I hope group 3 don't mind me speaking first. Because we talked. I mean, the main thing, you know, I'm probably repeating it, is the crew training aspect. I've had several instances where I've been left on the plane with no help, where the language has just been horrendous. And the crew training has to be to a standard where they know exactly how to manually handle someone if that's needed, you know, as well as speaking to them. Certainly, as also has been brought up, this absolute need to have priority booking. You know, but I think the other thing we talked about was also the clear universal booking system. Many times I've gone to book and there's just a really, the categorization doesn't actually include electric wheelchairs. It doesn't include where you can put information. And I had a situation this year where I was booked onto an Aer Lingus flight, turned up, because I hadn't given them my full wheelchair details, I was refused boarding in my wheelchair. EasyJet, everything was there for me to fill in. So I think having this universal system where all airlines, if you press disability button, take you to a system, take you to a page where you can put all of your details in, and they're passed on to everybody. So I don't have a pilot coming at me saying, show us your batteries, because we haven't got the details.
Can I come in there, David?
Of course, please do. Yeah.
I'm kind of to throw a little bit of a solution stroke grenade in the room. My kids have both got access cards for festivals and concerts. And when they put the data in, it was right, okay, they're MND, they've got power wheelchairs, lots of information. So ultimately, when we book tickets and go to Glastonbury or Reading, whatever, they know exactly what we need. So if we have some database that we have, and I know this means giving out all details, but I personally don't have a problem with that. And if someone does, then raise their hand and tell me why. But I feel if an airline or an airport has your information, they can. There's no excuses then to give you that safe journey and to make sure it's updated if you change your chair and so forth. In America, that's going to be a very tricky thing to do because you don't have to declare anything. But my argument is this is safety. This is about your journey. This is a little thin metal tube flying around the sky, 30,000 feet up in the air, 500 miles an hour, and there's 200 people sitting on 30 gallons of jet fuel. The rules of engagement are very different. So more help, please, and we can make that journey. But I want to know the arguments against that. I think that's what I'm trying to say, and I mean it as a possible solution, not the.
I think it's a very good solution, Chris. The thing that we would have difficulty enforcing is global customers or that going some. But I think it's the perfect solution. It really is. I have no difficulty carrying a card saying what my requirements are if it's going to give me a service.
Thank you. Absolutely. And this is noted. I mean, there's a theme coming here, isn't there, around that, just making sure that the transport operators have that information to be able to provide the basic level of service that's required. Looking at the time, we've got 8 minutes left. Unfortunately, as I say, I think we could keep talking all afternoon, and we will definitely look to reconvene this conversation. But yeah, moving to group number 4 now. If you could share any kind of builds or inputs based on your discussion, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi everyone. It's Steve Wilson. I'm from Jet2, jet2.com, Jet2 Holidays. I'll speak on behalf of Group 4, which I believe was okay. Try and keep this short and sweet. We covered off wheelchair onboard aircraft as kind of a significant factor, but we also discussed mobility aid damage generally within that as well, and the accountability where that sits, linking that back into legislation, Montreal Convention, not fit for purpose anymore, limited amounts of financial areas that could be pinned back onto an airline, even though the airline ground handlers potentially are at fault. We talked about accessible bathrooms on board aircraft and generalised accessibility on board aircraft, because actually, for the most part, that doesn't exist or it lacks. There's only requirements under the legislation for new aircraft or retrofitted aircraft, but that still means there's a substantial amount of aircraft out there that don't have accessible bathrooms on board. We talked a lot about behavioural change within all elements, whether that's the airline, the tour operators, the travel agents, service providers in the airports, and the need for a consistent level of training. I think that when you look at all of the training that's out there and all the different training providers, everybody does it differently. If you had a consistent one version of the truth training that was delivered across everybody, then you're all talking the same language, you're all using the same language, you're all trained to the same standard, and you'll find that different airlines and different airports have got different budgets, so you'll get a far higher level of training in some and a far lower level of training in others, depending on what is available and what the budget says. Whereas if you had one way of working, one version of the truth, you'll then have a consistent set of standards across everyone. We talked, the fourth point was around kind of legislation review, and the fact that the legislation, as Chris has already mentioned, is very old, it's outdated. Whether that's for the airports or the airlines, really, it's very much time centric, and it's not based on service quality. It's how quickly you can move somebody from A to B, rather than it being dignified, rather than it being safe, rather than it being service or personalized. Doesn't fit where we are in the industry today. Even though we've got CAP 2990, the airline guidance, again, it's all based on previous legislation. And then we talked about communication and the communication stream between customer, user, airlines, airports, service providers, everybody in that journey. And the IATA code process and the IATA code standard is no longer fit for purpose. You can't categorize people into a box anymore. A WCHR, a WCHS doesn't mean what we thought it meant 20 years ago. The ability to add free text, the ability to look at DPNA and hidden disabilities, which is where I would sit, is so vast, and airports themselves are terrifying. Boarding an aircraft can be really nerve-wracking and really scary, and all of the sensory elements that go along with being in a huge hub of noise and sound. Yeah, we need to find either a consistency, a new approach to that, but the ability for customers to tell us what they need, how they need it, what does good look like for them, us as in the airlines and the service providers to all work together in the airport, so when that customer arrives, everybody knows how to help them, and it's personalized, which we currently struggle to do.
Steve, thank you. Really helpful points. I think the thing that's standing out to me is actually we're seeing themes in these points that are coming through, but every group is coming up with new ideas to build on it, which shows the opportunity here. Yeah, as I said, my job was to keep us on time, and I'm kind of looking at the clock. We've got 3 minutes left. So firstly, I'm not sure if this technology will cut us out at 1. If it does, I apologise. I just want to say thank you so much for the input today. But with this last bit of time, I'd love to hand over to Group 5 for any input from yourselves. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Simon Webb. Work at AMI as a senior IT engineer. AMI is a disability confident approved company, and has got various other disability recognition. So if anybody wants to have any conflab about that, I've got some contacts that can help you on your way. I'll just do the list of points from here. Mobile portable lifts and escalators and wider doors on aeroplanes, toilets and changing facilities at gates to include lifts and hoists, dignified assistance with onboard toilets, removable seats on all aircraft, so that people can be clicked in rather than having to sit in a chair, and wider seats for disabled in standard class. And that's it. That's our list.
A couple more things also we discussed was that communication chain. We talked about the airline, the airport, the dispatchers, the loaders. If any of those fail in the process, then the whole pack of cards falls over. So, some sort of contiguous communication chain run across the journey is really important. Also, we touched on the lack of experience in the sector. Let's get some lived experience. Let's get some disabled people working the other side of the fence, working for airlines, working for airports, such that it's not us and them, it's a community working together, reflecting wider society. And getting some lived experience would be a real benefit.
Exactly, it's that collaboration.
That is perfect, Mike. That is just what we need. We keep pushing that at airports, and as you say, it should be community. There's no them and us. We're all the same. We're all the same. Just support different football teams. That's all. So, listen, I've got a suggestion while we're on the screen, because we've obviously got this task and finish group, and I'm not sure when it's meeting, but maybe a kind of forum like this would be quite a good place to thrash out what the forum comes out with and look at what's coming out. I don't know whether that's a good idea, but we should. Any ideas about how to move this forward? Because I could sit on here for another hour. I really could. And yeah, it's great. So thank you, David, and Hafsa for facilitating it.
Well, thanks so much. I mean, you've done my job for me, I think, in wrapping this up, because such a powerful point to end on around collaboration. The key thing now is going to be what we do next from this and taking it forward. So as I say, we'll be circulating this recording, and the outputs as well. We'll be putting those together in a way that's really digestible, that can support drive change in the industry. I think we will share contact details of ourselves after this, so any further thoughts or reflections, please do share those with us. And I think your point, Chris, as well, around how we could potentially bring this group or people who are willing from this group back together again in the future, I think is going to be really, really powerful. So yeah, I would just close by saying thank you all so much for your time today. Apologies, it's been slightly rushed at the end, but I think that's a sense of how rich this discussion's been. So yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, have a great afternoon.
Yes, thank you, everybody. It's been really interesting, really great, but I live and breathe this stuff these days. Jesus. Right.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Great to all get together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely amazing.